What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Game Time Discussions. I'm Cameron Selby, sitting here with Emery Cuzzy, and we are going to tag team the tight end rankings, positional rankings for GTD. We did the quarterback, running back, and receiver last week. If you want to go check those out, but we are attacking the rest of the offense this week. So starting with tight end position, it's a whole lot of fun. It's one of the more underrated classes, so it's going to be a lot of fun to talk about for sure.
Yeah, Dustin's normally or was with us last time around, but he has some March Madness to get to because this is that week where March Madness has started. So we're not gonna be recording with him today. But like Cam said and alluded to, this is a really good tight end class compared to prior years. We're gonna have multiple guys go in the top 3 rounds that are have a lot of upside. So we ranked 6 today. We have 2 honorable mentions, but actually the honorable mentions are capable of being ranked on this list, but we just didn't decide to put them on there because it is a deep class. So let's get into it.
Cool. Yeah. So starting
So
off.
there we go.
Looks like we got Gunnar Helm out of UT and Jake Brennenstuhl out of Clemson. A couple of honorable mentions. Going to be mid-round selections at some point in the draft, but really solid tight ends. I'll let you get into each one of them for a quick blurb.
Yeah, Gunnar Helm is actually a guy I was hoping that would be higher on this list. I thought, coming out of the season, he was one of the guys that I was like, oh, I really like this guy. I can't wait to like really dive into watching him and stuff like that. He kind of felt like the safety blanket, the whole year for Quinn Ewers and like kind of made things feel right with that offense. He kind of made everything better. One thing I want to point out about him, he had a 79.14% inline tight end the snaps this year, which is something that we didn't see with any of the other guys on this list. Most of them are closer to like 55-ish.
Hmm.
70, 80% is really, really good for, just kind of talking about what type of player he is, especially since he was really productive as a pass catcher. And some things, that he really brings to the table. I mean, he's got the size and the frame to play inline tight end. Great hands, better run blocker than his actual run blocking grade, I think. PFF has him at a 43.5, which I thought he was much better than that. So I think their run blocking grade at times for tight ends is harder to get right. Kind of like if you're not run blocking on every play and also who you're run blocking, if you're going to actually like block down on a defensive end or have to reach like an outside linebacker, or if you're going up to the safety or second level at this, for linebackers, it's a little bit different than maybe normal like run blocking grades go. And it's all about scheme fit. Some things that he lacks. He's not very explosive as an athlete, and that was the biggest thing I really saw out of him. He's probably a tad bit tight in his lower body, not going to give you that like explosiveness as you can tell. And I think some of his functional strength is hurt by that tightness. Um, and he's just not going to stretch the field. Like he's not a field stretcher. He's more of like the underneath guy, finding the soft spots in the zone, safety blanket type of tight end. But I really liked him this year, and I thought he did a really good job. He could even end up in the top 100 when it's all said and done. He's that type of player. So I really like him. I don't think that, just because he's honorable mention, we should overlook him, basically. And then the next guy is Jake Brennenstuhl from Clemson. Um, he's an interesting guy because he's a very athletic, like tight end, great hands in traffic, but I just thought, and he's a big mismatch. Like he feels very basketball style player esque, which is kind of what you want in the red zone and stuff like that. Some of his problems, though, he has a slender frame, and he's probably the worst of the group at run blocking. Him and one other player that we'll get to. Between the two of them, they just don't really give you a lot in that regard, and that kind of makes him feel more like a tight end too in an offense. So a lot of 12 personnel might be his best option to getting on the field, and he just lacks a little bit of that power. And if you don't have that, you can't really play inline tight end because that really hurts your alignment flexibility. You're more of an H back, a slot, but putting your hand in the dirt and actually having to block and getting on the field more often, I think that kind of hurts him here. I also think that his 7.5% drop rate in space was a lot worse than him actually in traffic, funny enough. When it was easy and routine, he messed up more than when he actually like had to make a play.
Hmm.
So those are kind of my reservations with him, but I think stylistically, he's a really good tight end when it comes to like the red zone and being a threat there. So, yeah.
Right. Yeah, and then also, not many of these like high profile tight ends in this class really participated at the combine, but both Gunnar Helm and Brendan Stoll did. Neither of them really wowed from a perspective. I know Gunnar was one of the worst in terms of,
Hmm.
splits and 40 and, athletic tools, but it's not like you didn't have a couple of occasions where he was hurdling defenders, so he has a little bit there, but that's just not the style of tight end that he is. And then Brendan Stoll, he's just kind of raw, like you said, but there's something there in the later rounds. So it could be one of those mid round flyers that could really work out in the end.
Yeah, and like I said, I like both of these guys. They both have a chance to make the top 100. So it's not like I'm just saying like they're, fifth rounders, sixth rounders. Like I feel like they could be fourth, end of the third, early fourth rounders, and it'll all be about scheme because like I said, if you're gonna put your hand in the dirt 80% of the time this year, like for Gunnar Helm, teams might be like, we need that style of player. Tight end is a little bit more wishy-washy because it is very, very set up for like this is what we do. We need this type of player, and these kind of guys that work in these types of ways can make it on teams a little bit earlier than you might expect overall.
Mhm. All right,
All
yeah.
right.
So we'll jump right into our what we're calling the top six of this class. Starting off first slide, have Terrence Ferguson out of Oregon, and then Harold Fannin Jr., a very polarizing and interesting
Hmm.
prospect from Bowling Green. So we'll jump right into these guys.
Yeah, we'll start with Harold Fannin. He was, and I left his All American up there. I think that's worth mentioning. Of course, he definitely deserved it for what he did this year. Of course, he had the most receptions and yards for any player in the country. So, absolutely stud when it came to production overall. And 8 out of 13 of his games this year were over 100 yards. So he did really well. He had a 78% completion percentage when thrown to, which is awesome, and then a 2.5% drop rate, which is also super impressive. So he was really, really good. And he's five here, but I think the biggest problems with him are, he doesn't have the athletic tools that some of the other guys have. Like, if you're just gonna like put a vacuum around things and just be like, oh, who had the best production? Well, Harold Fannin would be number one overall. But at the same time, he doesn't have the athletic tools, the size, and things like that. If you looked at his combine, he was actually, either mid to lower on that list. And that didn't even include because Colson Loveland and Tyler Warren didn't go to the combine and actually participate. So they were both off. But he was either in the middle or towards the end on all the athletic tools. And then I think that, he's just a smaller guy, height and weight issues a little bit, and that's really going to hurt him more so than anything in the pass block or in the run blocking aspect of his game. I think he can probably get up to the second level and block linebackers and safeties, but he is not going to be able to put his hand in the dirt and help you in basically any way, in my personal opinion, in blocking for like a down block on a defensive end or something like that because he just doesn't have that functional strength that you want to see. And I think that really hinders him, and that's why he's this low. And I've actually seen him. ESPN has him seventh of tight ends. Like I'm not going to push him that far down because he's legit as a pass catcher. He is a problem when he has the ball in his hands. He's a running back with the ball, but I just think there's some bigger issues as a run blocker and doing those types of things, but I think hurt him more than other players maybe. And then Terrence Ferguson actually had the best scores at the combine. He had the fastest 40. He did a lot of really good things at the combine. So that was his kind of calling card this year was, or the thing that really stood out and helped him move up boards was that combine. There are some things that he does really well, but there are some things that I think he just has some issues with. So he was a 25% contested catch rate, which is awful for a guy that is tight end and they play post up type of ball. But he only had four drops on the year, and he has an 8.5% drop rate. I actually saw the highlight of like somebody showing off his drops, all four of his drops. Two of them weren't really drops, and you can kind of go into all that stuff, but truly at the end of the day, he's got solid hands. He's a red zone threat. He has good size overall. He's a good run blocker, good athleticism, and he's alignment versatile. So he actually has all of those things, but he's a subpar production player. He's not a nuanced at route runner, and everything kind of feels like release packages are just subpar. He doesn't have anything that he's just got to, he's great at, but he's just good at a lot of things. And so I think that's kind of where I had him and why I felt that way. He did play for Oregon. He was, I mean, he was a 2 year guy. And then also this year, I mean, he was only an honorable mention all conference player, but I mean, it's in the Big Ten where you have the Colson Lovelands and Tyler Warren. So, okay. But at the same time, I just think, his ceiling is actually really, really solid. And that's kind of that's why he gets into the sixth spot over some of the other guys that I think maybe don't have the same ceiling that he has.
Yeah, and with Ferguson, also, I mean, he's got a ton of starts and experience. I mean, he did
Mm.
play as a true freshman all 14 games. Obviously limited production, but basically being a 3 year full time starter. This year, even though Oregon's offense was potent and high flying, he was really kind of not the priority, and that's kind of what kind of hurt his numbers a little bit. But like you said, very solid tight end both in the run game and pass game, but just needs to clean up a little bit. And then with Harold Fannin, like you said, just has all the production you can ask for. All those numbers that you see, except for I guess the touchdowns, are FBS one records, not necessarily just hey leading the league this season among all pass catchers, including receivers in receptions and yards. But that's all time records from the tight end position, which is very very impressive, including his last game, which was in the bowl game, 17 receptions for 213 and a score. Just fantastic, all you can ask for, and basically back-to-back years as PFF's tight end one. So he's a very interesting one. It was encouraging, at least, that he did put on 11 pounds for the combine because I know the
Hmm.
size was a concern. And then obviously him being 6'3", he's the lone one that's not 6'5", 6'6" of these really strong prospects at the position. But I mean, it's not like we haven't seen 6'3" or smaller tight ends thrive before, but maybe he might have a little bit more work to do in terms of becoming that every down just go to reliable threat. But if he
Yeah.
becomes something very strong, we've seen several tight ends in the middle rounds really fault themselves. Some of the all time best, or even the best of today's game, were all middle round picks. So
Yeah, and I also wonder if like that 11 pounds actually hurt his speed overall. I mean, he's a very young prospect. He's only going to
yeah,
be 21 when the season starts. So that's always,
it
of
doesn't
course,
turn
good to look
21
through.
until
Yeah.
July, late July. So that's
Yeah,
another sign
exactly.
because he's doing all this production and he's the young one of the class.
Hmm.
So and like you said, the run grade is pretty strong, but maybe he's got a little bit more lacking than that would indicate.
Hmm.
Like you said, because of the inline outline stuff, a lot of that can be misconstrued a little bit in terms of comparing and contrasting. But yeah, both of these very solid guys that could hear their names called on late day two or maybe even early day three, depending on how people value tight end in this class. So
Right. All right, let's go over to the next tier. This will be tier three, but it's two players. We're gonna start off with Elijah Arroyo. And he's a really weird one because he's actually the opposite a little bit of like Harold Fannin in the way that like he didn't have the production and wasn't like he was in an explosive offense. You would have expected him to kind of do and have a little bit more this year. 35 receptions for 590 yards, 7 touchdowns. He has a 2.8% drop rate. That's awesome.
mhm,
Um, and one thing that I really want to like point out about him is he had 16.9 average yards per reception, which
that's
is
pretty insane.
yeah, which is insane for a tight end at any level ever. Like, I mean, that's like high end upside wide receivers that go for deep ball step production for that. He had one drop on the year, which is awesome. He's the guy that's just like super athletic. I don't think actually. I think he helps you just as much as Harold Fannin does as a blocker, probably. He's more what's the way of putting it? Like he's more nuanced as a blocker, and I think he's been coached up better. But I don't know that he's a strong player or anything like that. But um, he is very athletic. He's going to be a red zone threat. He's an absolute mismatch nightmare for safeties or linebackers. He's very nuanced as a route runner, and he attacks linebackers and safeties vertically, which makes when you think about like what your tight end can do, a lot of tight ends can't run certain routes, like can't really run the seam and make teams uncomfortable. Well, this is one of those guys that I think can really run that seam route or right down the middle of the field and really make teams uncomfortable because he's going to really stretch the field. That is huge to me, especially if you're just talking about what type of player you're going to get or, you know, what kind of team will draft him even. Those are the kind of guys that really make the other team uncomfortable and get other players open, not just themselves. He's a smooth criminal, like how he moves and like how he reacts to what he sees on a defense is just really, really smooth. And he's willing to block. That's one thing that I think is good, is he's really willing to block. His 20% contested catch rate is not very good. But I think that that can be fixed because I think he's actually, obviously, I think he has good hands. So I think he just needs to be able to play through the ball a little bit better. But I think he will learn that a lot more when he gets to the NFL, especially for his size and things like that. He's also a very young player. And then some cons. I mean, yeah, he has bad hand placement on run blocking every once in a while. And then also run after the catch, which for such a athletic type of build and type of guy, I'd expect it to be better. So improving his run after the catch would be really good. But I love his athleticism. And we were talking earlier why Elijah Arroyo versus Harold Fannin. And I was like, well, I think I'd take the ceiling of Elijah Arroyo long before I'd take Harold Fannin. And I think I don't know if they have similar floors necessarily. Like, I think Elijah Arroyo's floor is probably a little bit higher, but I mean, that's a lot closer than I think their overall ceiling is.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, Elijah Arroyo, in terms of the Senior Bowl and the early part of the offseason draft process, he was one of the biggest standouts at the position, if I remember correctly. Is that
Yeah,
right?
he was. Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
so yeah, and he was a late bloomer, former four-star that it took a while for him to actually start getting on the field and contributing. Had some knee injuries to deal with in his sophomore and junior years, but had 11 receptions total his first 3 seasons, and then obviously breaks out this year, plays every game, and goes for 590 and 7 touchdowns and a very, very high flying offense. So a lot of big play stuff is what he's about, and he just kind of needs to clean it up to where it's more consistent. Like you said, the contested catch rate needs to improve a little bit, especially when he has the size.
Hmm.
But also, some people are just late bloomers, especially at the tight end position. Like a lot of guys just kind of come out of nowhere, and if I'm not mistaken, when you and Dusty did the way too early look at 2025 prospects for the tight end position, it looks pretty different for the most part because of how many people just did not pan out. Oscar Delp just one of those to that comes to mind, and then a lot of
Right.
these guys that just had no production all of a sudden were great. Gunnar Helm was another guy that was not even a starter coming into the year, and then he took the job and kept it.
Hmm.
So a lot of interesting things with these guys, but yeah, Elijah Arroyo definitely floor ceiling combo that looks pretty solid. As he's developed.
Yeah, and a lot of big analysts really like him. So I think they're seeing what the ceiling is just like me, but I think you can pump the brakes a little bit on just like if he doesn't pan out, like I don't know that like if he does not pan out, it's not like he's a backup, like a long time backup. I think he is a kind of guy that like if he doesn't work out, he's probably out of the league type
Hmm.
of player. Not so much like he doesn't have that type of floor where he's just always going to be in the NFL, kind of running like a veteran at one point in his life. You know what I mean? He's just kind of going to
Right.
be, I'm out after a certain amount of time because I can't make it.
Hmm.
The next guy is a guy that I had some reservations on at first, but I I just grew to really really like this guy and Mason Taylor. He's one of Dustin's favorites, that's for sure. We talked about him a lot or a couple times during the year. He is the floor guy in this class. Like, I think Mason Taylor is one of the best if you just look at overall floors for where he will be picked. Mason Taylor really is going to be a very solid pick to whoever gets him in either the late second, third round. He'll be very solid. Um, so with him, he only had the 2 touchdowns. So I think if you just look at his stats there, I think production could have been better, but he has soft hands. He's got an athletic build. He is the son of Jason Taylor. And he's got that athletic build. He's a good mover. And I think he's very intelligent when it comes to route running. So he can improvise as the routes develop and find really, find soft spots. He's what I call the intermediate king, He's not like a scheme dependent player, but he's an intermediate king. Like that just kind of means like if you're running even an 8 to like 15-yard route, he's going to find a way to get open. And that's kind of why I just like feel like this is a guy that's pretty easy to plug and play in any scheme and just like find a way to, make plays. He's a little slender, slender build, but so that gives him a little bit of issues in blocking, but at the same time, I think he's actually a solid blocker. I think he's young, so I think he is a build that can turn into a really good run blocker, while other players like Harold Fannin, I said earlier, 6'3", he has a little bit harder of a time to adjust to actual run blocking in the NFL. I think Mason Taylor can put his hand in the dirt and get after it though. But one thing, like, the two touchdowns does kind of scare me most of anything because I just feel like that, you're the tight end, you have to be the red zone threat a little bit more. He was on the field. It wasn't like, he wasn't on the field, and it wasn't like LSU wasn't scoring points. So I wish he would have scored a little bit more, but that's just sometimes luck of the draw on plays and stuff like that. So I think he's one of the safest players you're going to see at the position in the second round and the third round.
Yeah, and with him, like you said, he's the safe guy. He's Mr. Consistency. Every single game this season had at least 3 receptions. All 3 years at LSU, he had over 30, what was it, 36, 38, and 55 receptions
Hmm.
respectively. Set program records at the position for both yards and receptions, which is encouraging. I mean, he's not the big yak guy. Obviously, only averaged 10.1 yards a catch throughout his college career, and you wish the touchdowns were there more. But a lot of LSU's game is just spreading and stretching the field. So it's
Hmm.
not like like LSU is rivaling being wide receiver U. They're not necessarily just pass catcher U. With the guys that they've used, and so a lot of that could just be scheme
Hmm.
and how they wanted to use stuff. So if he goes to a quarterback that is more of a, I love to utilize my tight ends a little more, he might thrive more than people realize as a pass catcher. But like you said, has the framework to do both. And I love me some tight ends that are able to both be great blockers and receivers. So if he's one of those guys, I'm all for it.
Yeah, he kind of is like the middle ground. I mean, kind of like Meyer from a couple years ago out of Notre Dame, that kind of player that has the ability to do both. So I think that's kind of his, not a comp, but like something I saw when I'm watching him in recent drafts. Because a lot of people like relating recent drafts over like long term. Like if I were to say Jason Witten, and people are like, "Oh yeah, I remember Jason Witten," but you don't remember every little thing about Jason Witten unless you watched him as a Cowboys fan.
Hmm.
Like, or so with most recent comps, that's who I kind of see more so than anything with him. And then at two, we have the Michigan Wolverine and Colson Loveland, part of that last year, part of that national championship team. And the reason, we at the end of, and I we talked about this a little bit too, but like at the end of this season, this last year, we kind of had this like thing of, oh, Harold Fannon's probably tight end three. He's rivaling Colston Loveland as tight end two. Well, then you started watching the film and you're like, never mind, no way, because Colston Loveland is legit as a prospect. He kind of reminds me of Dalton Kincaid, but probably, I mean, he's better in my personal opinion than Dalton Kincaid, but I think that's the type of like style he plays with. So he's not going to necessarily put his hand in the dirt as often, but he can because he is physically gifted, absolutely gifted. Um, I think just if you think about it, athleticism is his main thing. Um, Speed down the field. He's the high point catcher. He's a very nuanced route runner, especially against in the like underneath and intermediate zones. He's got very long arms. And it shows up on film more so, but yeah, like I think he's got very long arms, so he can block, and he has like the extension on the catches. He's 6'6". I think he even looks bigger sometimes than that on film because he's just he's skinny. So that's his biggest, like, if you're gonna push back, he's a little bit skinny. he's not the best player after the catch. And that's why you can see, again, like we just talked about Mason Taylor, the 10 to 11 yard per reception. Like we would like to see that go up, but he definitely has that Dalton Kincaid style of play. And so I think that's kind of my feel and my like coming out of college. That's who I would really, put him with if I was just going to talk about the most recent years.
Yeah, and with him, there's a lot of people that love him, and a lot of it, at least on the surface, I was kind of confused on how he was just so highly viewed and rated. I mean, early mocks when we were first started doing this had him in the teens and 20s, and I just was like, this is not justified. But like you said, it's just watching the film and just seeing what he had to work with. I mean, he went to a run heavy offense that does not really prioritize pass catchers, and he was their best pass catcher on their national championship team. Earned all Big Ten honors, and
Mm.
then second team All American, and then this year was another All Big Ten team player, and that was even worse quarterback play when they were just really really bad at quarterback for stretches, and they barely even threw the ball. But he really was. Their go-to guy when Roman Wilson and Cornelius Johnson were no longer there. So and on top of that, he also was battling, I think he had an ankle
Yeah,
injury
he had an injury. Yeah.
in the Texas game, and that really kind of lingered throughout the year. And yet he's still, even though his yards per reception dipped, still had more receptions, had more touchdowns. And yeah, he's just one of those guys that is a fringe first round pick for a reason. And a lot of people are probably putting him even, as almost a first round lock. So it's very interesting to see where he'll go. But yeah, he's one of those guys that has a lot to offer for the next level.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you brought up the quarterback play. I mean, they literally had no quarterback play at points in this year because they switched between starting quarterback, took him out, put a new quarterback in, and then went back to the original starting quarterback. So I think that whole thing was super interesting. And he just was like, I'm just gonna be good at football, and I'm not gonna care who's throwing me the ball. I'm just gonna continue being um, solid as a football player. And I thought that was good to see. I think he could develop as a run blocker. I mean, he is young, so I think he could develop as a run blocker, but he just body is lean and so he needs to add some muscle and stuff like that, but I think he could do pretty well at the next level. And I think he is a I didn't really mention this prior, but he is tier two. So like he is a big jump in my personal opinion from what we saw with Mason Taylor all the way up to Colson level, and that's a big jump. The
Mhm.
next guy will also be another tier above because and I'll pull him up now. One second. Because Tyler Warren, and he's one of the older ones in this group. He's a late bloomer. Let's just be honest.
Yep.
And it is what it is. But he went off this year, and he did basically everything he could to will his team to victory. He's a second team All American behind only Harold Fannin. He had 3% drop rate on the year. He has the typical size and weight. He had over 1,200 receiving yards. Like he put together one of the great seasons. As you can see down there, he was the John Mackey Award winner, second team All American, and then also he was the tight end of the year in the Big Ten. So he did it all at the position, and they asked him to do a lot. I mean, they asked him to play quarterback. They asked him to, of course, run the ball from quarterback. They asked him to catch the ball, do all the gadget things, and also just be a good tight end. So I was really happy to see like what he was able to do. Um, he is if we're gonna just talk about stylistically, he's the T.J. Hawkinson, George Kittle-esque player in this draft. He's going to try to like when he's blocking, he's going to try to bury you in the ground, and then when he's going to catch the ball, he's good at yards out, yak after the catch and like doing good things like that. But also like just he attacks the ball in the air. When the ball's in the air, he is going to try to jump over you, jump through you, go do anything he can to go get the ball. And he's got physical hands, so he'll very strong hands. When he gets the ball, it's stuck. So that's really good. And then just he's a matchup issue for sure. For going to be a matchup issue for a lot of teams. He can play alignment versatility, and we already talked about him playing quarterback a little bit, but like he can literally line up anywhere on the field, and that makes him very valuable also. Some things that he, could improve on. I mean, he has some quick. He's not necessarily. I don't know that he's the best athlete ever by any means, but so that's something. But I think that it comes with some lack of quickness and stuff like that. But I'm really not that worried about it. He may lack some play strength, but at the same time, like I've seen him, of course, pancake multiple players that are D linemen. So at the same time, I don't know if that's true. He fits the tight end mold that we love. He fits that mold. You know, can do everything really well, and some things he might even be able to do great at the next level. So that's why he's tight end one, and he's a top 10 player in this draft class for sure. And I've seen people pop. He could possibly be top five, top four for people, including us. So
Yeah, he's just a really fun football player to watch, and Penn State, even though they had a really strong team that nearly went on to the national championship game this year, um, he absolutely willed that offense, and
mhm.
even though they do have a 1-2 great rushing attack, just came up in big moments. I think back to on the road cross country matchup against USC.
Mhm.
On the road, got to have it against a team that you shouldn't be close with, and he goes 17 for 224 in the tug. Um, Against Ohio State has 47 receiving yards, okay, but he also has 47 rushing yards. He's also had over 180 all-purpose yards games in the quarterfinal against Boise State, a couple touchdowns, and just they knew the ball was going to him, and he still produced anyway.
Yeah.
He will be the first tight end in NFL history to be drafted in the first round with a 1,000-yard season under his belt, and he had 1,200 this year. Harold Fannin would obviously be included in that well, but he won't be a first rounder.
Right.
But yeah, he just had an incredible year. Like you said, he is older because it did take him a while. He was a fifth-year player to get there, but at the end of the day, tight end is one of those positions that hey, they come out of nowhere sometimes, and you just gotta deal with it. So he is definitely a first-round lock, top 20 pick lock. Just kind of placement. Where do you want to put him? He's kind of in the Brock Bowers perspective of just like I have no idea where to place him, but I bet you somebody's going to take him, between 7 and 15, and
Right.
they're going to be happy with it. Don't know who they are at this point, but they're going to get an upgrade at the position for sure.
I mean, just like the Raiders last year, as a Raiders fan, did not expect Brock Bowers to be on my team this year. Not
Yeah,
mad about it at all.
just
Like very,
drafted
very
our tight
happy
end
about it.
one from 2023 or
Yeah.
2022, and then draft this guy anyway because Brock Bowers was him best tight end prospect ever, and justified. And obviously, he set all kinds of records and justified his position this year. Tyler Warren can do similar things, so it'll be interesting to see once we jump into the comparison of classes how high he ranks for you.
Yeah. So Brock Bowers is still number one. It's not even.
Of
I.
course.
It's. I mean, so last year, crazy enough, and I do like referencing this part of it because like we do our rankings based on where every year where we have prospects and what we think of them. Tyler Warren's going to be between 5 and 7 for us. We're probably not going to move him very much from the first ranking. Brock Bowers was three. Or yeah, three behind Caleb Williams and Marvin Harrison, I believe. It was
Yeah.
either three or two, so whichever one. He could have been higher. But other people, and I only know this because I just looked at the sheet a little while ago, but everybody else had him at 7. Everybody. Daniel Jeremiah, Mel
Yep.
Kiper, all of them. PFF, they all had Brock Bowers at 7 in that class. And I get it. That was a really strong class. But Brock Bowers was a blue chip player in that class, and he should not have been behind 5 to me.
Hmm.
And Tyler Warren is to me is not a blue chip player. He's possibly the closest thing to it in this class that isn't a blue chip player. But if you just look at what these two guys are, like they're both incredible. 2024 Brock Bowers versus 2025 Tyler Warren. I'm taking Brock Bowers, and I'm glad he's on my team. Basically, is at the
Hmm.
end of the day how I look at it. Do you
Yeah,
see?
and
I was going to say, do you see anything that you want to talk about on this list here, though?
no, I mean, I think it's pretty straightforward. It's just Brock Bowers and then 2025 for the most part. And
Mm,
we knew after Brock Bowers last year, he was it was definitely a S tier guy and then a bunch of B tier guys, and we were trying to make justified reasons because like Jatavion Sanders was consensus tight end too, but then he wasn't as athletic, he wasn't as productive as you would have liked, and then all of a sudden he started dropping down people's boards after the combine. Ben Sinnott, I mean, we really liked him out of Kansas State, but all of a sudden now it's just like they're re-signing old guys and falling out, and it's just like I don't see the role anymore. Teo Johnson is a guy that you really liked, and he was production and spot or productive in spots last year. I thought the interesting one, I mean, obviously as a Texas fan, but just Gunnar Helm versus Jatavion Sanders, just because obviously back-to-back years in the same offense, and Gunnar made the most of where he was, whereas Jatavion, it always felt like we were missing some stuff
Hmm.
out of him. So, but yeah, a lot of good names on this list. But yeah, it's one of the more underrated positions this year for sure, because of how many quality tight ends there are, and obviously I think there's a gap between like the upper echelon of tight ends, and I'm not just talking from a fantasy perspective, but just a talent in general perspective
Right.
in the league between after like the fifth or sixth name, there's a big drop, and so I think we're starting to see more and more talent to where there's a much wider range of names in the middle tier of the position.
Yeah, I think that with this whole, grouping is like Jatavion Sanders was talked about as possibly the number one tight end last year, and he's 11 on this list. It's kind of, or not number one. I'm sorry, number two behind Brock Bowers, and he's 11 on this list. So just the talent and the ability in this class was just so much higher, and we actually have some very high echelon players that are going to help teams immediately when they walk in the door. Colston Loveland is a guy that's going to help teams immediately when he walks in the door. If it's Denver or whoever, everybody wants to mock Denver there, of course, but
Mhm.
whoever it is, I think he helps them in like right off the rip. I think Mason Taylor, his floor and his ability to come in immediately will be solid. So it's a really solid class. And if Brock Bowers wasn't in last year's class, it would have, they would have taken the whole top six basically for this whole for this exercise.
Yeah,
So
but yeah, that wraps up this position. We appreciate you guys tuning in. Please give us a subscribe if you haven't already. Like the video. Tell us what you like about this class and what you don't like about this class. We're on the road to 250. We're breaking down every single position in terms of our ranks and tiers. And, we put out our big board. We've got a mock coming out. Not this week, but the following week, and just a whole lot of excitement. Draft season peak time, basically starting pro days as well. So it's a whole lot of fun to talk about, and we just want you guys to be a part of it and get your voice in.
yeah, absolutely. Like Cam said, please go like, comment, and subscribe on this video. We need to tell y'all to do that more often. We're pretty bad about that. We just enjoy the content, of course, but making this community as big as possible is kind of the trick to us being able to talk to everybody, get everybody's thoughts. The comments. We love the comments. We need more comments, of course, and so that we can interact and talk about different things. Tell us about this class. Tell us what y'all think, and tell us what you dislike because I'm okay with criticism. Please tell me what you think
Yeah,
we don't do well. That's fine. I'm not gonna. It's not gonna hurt my feelings. I promise. And just hang out with us, and all the things. But we appreciate y'all hanging out today, and we will see you on the next position.
later, guys.